As a full-on strike by unionized liquor workers continues, frustrations are rising and shelves at private liquor outlets around the province are emptying. I can tell you firsthand, McNabb, it is slim pickings in the stores closest to the city, north and east of where I live, just outside the perimeter. So I don't know what you're seeing out there, but it's not good in my neck of the woods.
Not good if you're looking for a specific item. There's still stuff available, but it might be what you're hunting for. You might be a restaurant that needs a bigger supply. You might be someone planning a wedding, so you're keeping a close eye on the strike for all sorts of reasons. And the union representing these workers, MGEU, says it's going to continue striking until it receives what it calls a fair offer from the Crown Corporation. That offer, currently as we understand, stands at a 2% raise over the next 4 years, while the union says it won't accept anything less than what Premier Heather Stephenson and her cabinet are receiving, which is a 3.3% raise this year and 3.6% next year. MGEU President Kyle Ross joins us now. Good morning, Kyle.
Morning, guys. How's it going?
I'm good. We're curious, Kyle, is that the line in the sand? You know, the raise the MLAs are receiving, and unless you get there or close to there will be no acceptance of any offer?
I think we're open to have conversations. Right now, we're not even having a conversation with the employer or the government. They've drawn a line in the sand at 2% and haven't moved since the strike began. So it's really upon them. We're in this position to strike because they really won't bargain. They won't move. It's really unfortunate.
We heard from the Premier late last week, Kyle, that she suggested that your union isn't being forthright about what is on the table. She says there are wage increases in the range of 15 to 25% on the table. Is that accurate?
It's partially accurate. There are many members at the bottom end of the scale where there's going to be compression from the minimum wage going up. We'll see some raises, but it's not the whole membership, and we're trying to find a deal that supports our whole membership. There's about 600 members that will only see 8 to 9% over the life of this 4-year contract, while only getting 1.75% over the 4 years before that. So it's about 10% or less over the last 8 years, which is really not a place where anyone can really survive at right now.
Well, there's that talk about what's been going on out there with inflation, of course. And so on one hand, we'll have listeners weighing in, Kyle, saying, I don't get this. You know, people deserve to have more money given the cost of living. And then others will say, look, it doesn't need to be 3%, that it's unnecessary. And so I'm curious what you're hearing on the picket lines. We had a colleague mention this morning that she was at a liquor store on the weekend, and a customer was so upset with what's going on that she was yelling at the picketers. Where do you things stand in terms of what the customers are saying to your membership?
I think for the most part, customers are supportive. We've heard from Manitobans that we're just asking for a fair wage. We know it's fair. It's a 5-year rolling average of Manitoba CPI. It's what the Premier and Cabinet have all taken, and all the MLAs. And we're just asking for the same thing. It's not an exorbitant amount of money. Remember, most of these workers on average make less than $26,000 a year, not $189,000 like Premier Stephenson.
I think that's one of the conversations people have. Help us understand the different level of pay. And how is that determined, Kyle? If I work at Manitoba Liquor Store, are there full-time employees? Are they all part-time? And what's the top wage and what's the entry-level wage?
The entry-level wage is $14.91. And for the most part, over the last probably, I guess they were saying maybe 7 or 8 years, most full-time positions have disappeared. If the person that had a full-time position left, they've backfilled that with part-timers. So there isn't very many full-time work. And the pay scale works by hours of service. So currently you start at 0, and then at 330 hours, they move you up to the next level. And then I think it's 1,000 hours, and then I think it's 2,000 after that. And the employer is looking at compressing those pay scales up into one. So if you've worked 1,500 hours and now they hire a guy off the street, they're going to make the same money as you do after you spent all this time with the employer. So it's really a tough sell for our members, this collective agreement they're trying to push on us. Our members really understand it. I spoke to many of them, and it's really just not a place where they're willing to go.
One of the things we've heard from listeners this morning and many days last week, as I understand, Kyle, is that, you know, during the pandemic, liquor sales were deemed an essential service. And then now, because they wanted to keep the booze flowing in theory for those who struggled, for those who had addictions and others, do you see a scenario where suddenly you're declared essential and you could be legislated back to work given that historic sort of precedent that was set during pandemic?
I guess anything's possible. Really, we're just fighting for fairness. Our workers feel really disrespected because they were called essential. They were called heroes. They went through all the thefts and all the violence in the stores, and now while receiving 2 zeros, a 0.75 and a 1 over those 4 years, Now we're asking for a little fairness and something the Premier got herself, and we're just not seeing it.
So this strike is now, Kyle, not only inconveniencing Manitobans in terms of purchasing alcohol at most outlets, it's also straining the resources and impacting business whose revenue models include the sale of alcohol. What do you say to the owners and operators of restaurants? I know that the professional baseball team has struggled to make sure they have all the things that their customers want. What do you have to say to those who are struggling to serve their customers in the manner that they would like?
First off, I'd like to apologize, but really, it's the government that's forcing this. They need to call Heather Stephenson or their MLA and let them know to get this settled. We tried to settle this. We've tried to bargain. We gave a lot of notice before we went on strike because we wanted Manitobans to know, and we were hoping that we could hit the bargaining table and maybe settle before we even had to go on strike. The strike was a last resort, and unfortunately, they keep hiring scabs. They keep hiring replacement workers, paying them far more money than they're paying the starting wage at our workers. They just released a store one at $20 an hour where they pay our members make $14.91 to start. So I think it's really upon this government to settle this. We're open to settling this deal if they'll present something that's reasonable.
So reasonable doesn't have to be that 3.3 or 3.6%. Is that fair?
It's something reasonable, something our members will accept. I don't get a vote on this. Our members are the ones that decide. They decide whether they accept the deal or not, and in the end, it'll be upon them to make that decision once we get something that we can bring to them. What they've presented now is not even remotely close to something our members will accept.
You talk about, people wanting to maybe call their MLA or call the Premier's office. In theory, the political leaders are supposed to have nothing to do with these negotiations, Kyle, but we did have the Premier speak out on Friday talking about how she felt that your union potentially wasn't getting the correct message out and that people should go to the website at MBLL for the correct info. What do you think even about politicians weighing in on this when you're supposed to be a separate entity and not connected to the government as a crown?
Well, I know from my past history at MPI, when we were bargaining our last round, the government sent a letter to MPI and our union stating that it's the government's job to set the public sector wage mandate, and it's been their job for decades. So when this government comes out and says that they're not involved or it's not them, they're really being disingenuous because we know that they set the public sector mandate. They may not bargain hours of work, they may not bargain all the overtime provisions or whatever else in a collective agreement, but they set the wage mandate, and they're setting it right now at 2%, and we're asking them to change that because it's really an unfair mandate.
So, Kyle, no direct conversations right now. Where do things stand? Are there any discussions going on separately in terms of mediation? Is that still continuing? Let us know what's happening.
Conciliation is still ongoing. We're willing to meet with the employer anytime they want to meet. We're trying to get a deal done. They choose to just hold their ground and not have this and have Manitobans suffer. All those businesses you mentioned, some of them right in my hometown. I live outside the city. We have a small store there that sells liquor, and they're a big part of our community. They're part of the community club, and they're suffering too, and we'd like to see this end just as much as they would. So it's upon this government to end this.
Kyle, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Have a good day.
That was Kyle Ross, MGEU President.